Hey everyone, I wanted to just give you a step-by-step instructional video on how to create a webflow website that is basically fully automated with regards to new podcast episodes. So when I went looking for this, I found that there was podcast websites that had wonderful themes, but they required you to basically add a new blog post every time you had a podcast, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't just put the RSS feed together. So I'm going to show you how I did this with a few different tools, and it's all stuff that someone can do with no coding knowledge but some semi-technical knowledge, but this will show you exactly how I did it. So the things that I have that I've used, firstly, it's important to know those. So I'm obviously running on Webflow. I've used a particular theme which I'll link to, called Pinpoint, but it's a blog post theme. So any of the ones coming out of Medium Rare that have blog posts should be okay to do this, or you may be able to find another theme. As long as it supports blog posts and collections around blog posts, we're essentially going to leverage the blog post aspect to integrate to the RSS. I'm using Simplecast as my host, but I believe this will work for others as well, and I'll explain why in a bit. And that becomes important a little bit later on. And then the tool I'm using to stitch this all together is an amazing tool that I love, and it does a lot of other stuff too, called byteline. And that allows me to get the control I need to actually, to stitch this stuff together. All right, so just to start, so what I'm going to show you is I have a podcast that comes out 1 or 2 times a week. I like stuff to be automated. So I firstly have a show that basically has all of the information in it. Now, totally separate topic as to how I'm generating that. I'm using AI to help me do that, but that's for another video. But when I have an episode, it has an image, it has a whole bunch of content that's in here, and as a result, the Simplecast platform also creates a player. And that player, then what I'm wanting is I want an outcome where the episode is loaded into Webflow directly, and it loads the image, it loads the title, it builds the player on the fly, and it drops all of this information in here. And then utilizing the template, it means that I can then also offer another episode, or have an all episodes page where you can go and see any and play any of those in line as well. So that's what we're going to be building today. So firstly, to do that, we need to think about, well, how's Webflow set up with respect to this? So if we come into our Webflow editor, excuse me, our Webflow designer, my apologies. Come into the Webflow designer. I should have got that loaded first, but here we are. All right, come into the Webflow designer. What's important is to make sure that we have the blog post CMS set up correctly in the first instance. And so what that means is that we want to ensure that all of the components that we want to be able to pre-populate are here. So I have a blog post collection, if you like, a CMS collection, and I'll use this Carl Giordano. So firstly, what I've done is it comes with a title and a slug, and what I've called the episode notes, and this is all pretty stock standard, but I have ensured that we have a publish date, we have a particular variable called link to audio, and then we have a separate variable called the embed player variable, and that'll become relevant later on. So that's the first thing you need to do, is make sure that your CMS is set up with all of the relevant categories, all the relevant variables. And the reason why that's important is pretty self-evident. If you look here at an episode for this same one that we were looking at before for Dr. Carl, we come in here and we actually look at that embed code. You'll notice that the embed code is basically an iframe with a bunch of information and a player, and then a variable number that is in here. And that variable number is critical for being able to build the player on the fly. So that will become very important later on. But in terms of how we build that, firstly, on the webflow side itself, we can start by going in and saying, okay, well, if we had this, if we wanted to manually create this page or content, pages leveraging this content or this collection, there's really two pages that I care about. The first of those relates to the blog post itself. So this is the page that has one particular episode. So if I'm going to show that to you here, if we were to go into this page, it's the page that has the image and has all the rest of it. And so that's relatively straightforward. We can go into here and we can see that, okay, well, that is the image, that is the title, and the players in here. So inserting this content is pretty much out of the box with Pinpoint as a template, but even if it wasn't, being able to get this thing and to get this to pre-populate from the relevant part of the collection is relatively straightforward, because it's stuff that you know how to do. Okay, so that's Webflow 101. So it's basically populating stuff from the CMS. The player, however, is a little bit more tricky. So the way that we've done the player is I've done this using an HTML embed, and what I've done is I have put in that embed code. So if we had a look at this code here, I've put that embed code in there, and then I've injected this embed player variable, and that embed player variable isn't this whole thing, it's just this piece in here that tells Simplecast, which is the hosting company that runs it, this is the one that I want to embed. It's a unique URL that they generate, and how that gets in there is the RSS bit I'll show you a bit later on. But that's how we would do it manually. I could go to this, if I wanted to, I could go into Dr. Carl, I could copy this thing, and I could pull that bit of code and just paste that in directly. But because we want to do it dynamically, it means that we want to have the HTML code that has this, but has specifically taken out this and then drop that in as a variable, which you can do just using the add field here. All right, so that's how we will be building the player on the fly. The other page that's here as well is a page that has, let me just go back to my pages, that has all episodes, and this is essentially the all blog post page in the template, and it works the same way. Again, looking at the car one here, it is simply just pulling information from a collection and dropping that information in, and all I've done is I've added in to that block, so the block where we've got an individual post, another HTML embed. But in this case, what I've done, as opposed to using the player, I've got a basic HTML block that you can copy directly. I'll provide the actual code, or you can read it on the screen. And that is actually providing a link to the exact audio file itself. Again, that's another variable that instead of being just the variable, it's actually a link to exactly where to find the audio file. And so to provide an example of that, if we go back into the CMS and we have a look at this blog post here, and we look at Dr. Carl, you'll notice here that one of the variables here is linked to audio. It's exactly where this audio file can be found. And it's basically a link to an MP3 file and then a variable telling it where it comes from. And I'll show you in the RSS where that comes from. Now, you might ask, well, why didn't we just use the embed player in both cases? The reason why was the embed player counts a load on page as a listen, and unless you just want to wildly inflate your listens, and not accurate, the embed player, basically, if you load this all episodes pages that was here, let's get this out of the way. If you load this page and use the embed player, it would load like 50 views, which I think is the default that it shows on this page before you have to hit show more from the bottom from memory. It would just, so it'd be like every time you went to this page, you'd be basically giving yourself 50 downloads, which wasn't real. So using the code example that I provided in the page means that it's loading an audio file, but it's not auto playing it, and it therefore won't muck up the the number of listens in terms of your analytics. So that's why we're using an embed in one and a listen, basically a link to the MP3 in the other. Also, it looks a bit cleaner, so that's nice too. All right, so just to recap what we have a CMS, we have some custom variables that give us a link to the audio and the embed player variable, and we have then used that CMS to power two pages, one being the all episodes page that we have here, and that is using an HTML embed with a link to the audio, and then the other is to add an HTML embed into the blog post template or equivalent, and that is very specifically adding in the player code, but it is swapping out a variable here that would be fixed and putting in another CMS component called the embed player variable. So we're ready to populate this with a CMS. So now we can jump across to byteline. So the first thing to know obviously is, as you would know, that your podcast will have an RSS feed. So you need to get that RSS feed. So in Simplecast, that's relatively straightforward to find. You can go into here and under distribution from memory, it will have the RSS feed. So you should be able to get that from whichever player you're using or whichever hosting provider you're using, and refine this to how their player works. It may not work the same way. If it doesn't, you may have to move to Simplecast or find a player that does work this way, that's linked to your RSS feed. But yeah, so we get into byteline. The first thing we do is we grab our RSS feed. So you can see here, if I go back into the RSS feed, I'll just open that up first. You'll see I've got my feed from Simplecast and have basically said pull in all the fields. So I don't need to go into that. That's relatively straightforward. Just wait for that to load. The things that I have to do in byteline is they have a dedicated connector designed to create and update items in a webflow, and so obviously I've got to connect to the webflow, which I won't show you how to do. It's very straightforward. Just log into webflow and then use the connect thing, and then make sure you're linking to the correct collection inside the correct site. So that starts, and then the specifics here is the fun bit, I guess, or the tricky bit, which is excuse me, how to map these things. So everything that we want to be able to populate from webflow, so if we pull back here, we go into the collection. Let's just go into the collection, go into the collection here. So byteline is pulling back all of these potential variables that we had here, post title, slug title, custom fields, and it's saying which of these do you want to populate. And byteline makes this super easy. You just go in here and you try to find this thing. So in this case it's the title, so I'm looking for the title, Marshall Conlow Slow Jeans, or whatever the title is. For the slug, it works the same way. I don't need to worry about finding a slug. Byteline handles that, so that's amazing. I get the description. So if you remember here, I had a description, well, I can show you on here. I had a description for the show, which basically has all of the rich content here. And this is it's in a markdown that is automatically converted in byteline as well. So if there's basic formatting that exists, when it comes into webflow, you'll notice that it still comes in with these relative bolds and the like. So you get the formatting that you're seeing here is coming straight from the markdown, and byteline's converting that and making that nice for webflow. Thumbs up, byteline. So and then the image comes through, the thumbnail image comes through, author, and then I set this stuff manually. And then there's a few things that happen here that are probably the most critical things to understand. If you remember, we need to have a link to the actual audio file, and then we need this variable from inside that link to know, to be able to pull out that variable that can then go into the embed player. And so The link to the audio is relatively straightforward. This is completely it's here. It's basically it's declared directly inside of Simplecast, so you don't need to change anything in there, and you can see an example of that audio in here. So I'll just open that in a new tab so you can see it. So there's that audio file. That's the one. That's the one we're just dropping in directly. So that's easy. But the one that's more challenging is that we need to use a tool that that byteline offer that allows me to take a very specific part of that variable. So if we and what that is it's called a substring tool. And so what the substring tool is doing is it is basically enabling me, and you'll see the substring tool down here. It's enabling me to take a only part of that URL and feed that through. Right, so if we look at this link to audio, and I'm going to super slow down this so that we can see it. Let's go and open this up, and let's get this variable so we can see the thing that I'm talking about. Open that up here.
Hello and welcome to Shape the System.
And you'll see here that is the link to the audio, but the very particular part that we need here is the variable that's after audio here. This thing here was the actual audio file itself, and it's the variable that would be in the same embed player if we were to pull out the embed player. So let me just illustrate that to you. So let's get the that's from Marshall Conley, I think was the one that we're looking at here. So we open this up, we'll go into refresh fields, we'll go back into the webflow, and we'll just go to the Marshall Conley version, and you'll notice here that it has an embed player variable 663283 blah blah blah. Okay, cool. So if we go into the byteline one, and we're just gonna use the example that it's pulled through. So we'll go to the embed player variable that's here, and we'll pull that out. We'll pull this up here, so we can see here we're looking at Marshall Conley, just so we know we're looking at the same one. And we'll go to the audio file, we'll open that in a new tab. Okay, get that to stop playing. So you'll see here we've got a audio file here. Sorry, it was the first one, not the second one. My apologies. And if we go back into Simplecast and have a look at the show, let's just get back out to the show itself, the episodes, and we'll go to the same episode down here, just so we can see it. And if we get the web players here, you'll notice here it's got, and I'll just copy that so you can see it in full. You'll notice here it's got that variable here. That's exactly the same as the variable that's in that tiny little part there. So what we need byteline to do is to say from that whole URL, just grab this little bit. And so what I had to do was use this substring tool to grab position 79 to position 115. And I had to test it to make sure I was using it right, so run a few tests to do it. But basically, if you use your mouse and you go here and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, blah, 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 you'll eventually get to 79, and that will grab that 6 is position 79, and that last 5 is position 115. Now, if you're using a different player, then it may be different. This might be different as well, but it shouldn't. Once it's set, then it will continue to pull the right variable out of that string, and then that is what is being sent to that embed player variable, so that then when we go into the webflow and we use that variable, then we're automatically, when we're on this on the page here, and we're dropping in that variable, then it is automatically loading the player and loading that variable and doing it all perfectly. So in closing, that's how the whole thing hangs together. We have a good blog post theme that has the ability to have single posts and then all posts, if you like. So ignore the podcast themes, I would say. Go and find yourself a good, well-structured blog post theme or a business theme. We're using, in my case, Simplecast, and we're hijacking the fact that it has an embed player that has a variable in it that allows you to tell the embed player which episode we're talking about. We're using an RSS feed that will then feed information into the content management system, and we've set up variables for both the embed player variable, which the variable we'll use when we want the embed player, and the link to the audio file. And then we're using byteline to stitch the RSS feed to the webflow, and we're using one of their tools. They have a ton of different tools in this functions area here that do lots of different things, but we're using the tool, the substring, to extract the exact little bit that we want. And then what I've done from a settings perspective is I've got it so that it doesn't just automatically publish them. When they come in, you'll notice it sets up a new episode and it says it's staged for publish, and then I get to hit the publish button. I get an email from byteline that tells me it's ready to go, and it all happens automatically. It means that my website looks as good as this one, and is ranking for SEO and doing all the wonderful things with zero effort. And yeah, hopefully this guide can help you to do it. If you have particular questions, I guess I'd be happy to help you, or the main technical part of this, if you're familiar with webflow already, will either be just making sure you set the CMS part up, or just having a play with that substring tool, and the guys at byteline are super good. They'd be able to help you as well. So hopefully that helps. Have a great day.